too.
Good evening. I think we're ready to start. Great. We're here for the City Council Transportation Subcommittee. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chairman Rook.
Here.
Councilor Janess.
Here.
Councilor Noon.
Yeah.
3 present.
Thank you very much. Tonight, joined by my colleagues, Councilor Janess and Councilor Noon, along with Councilor Rita Mercier, our transportation engineer, Elizabeth Altman, and we have Karen from Santec. All right, awesome. The purpose of tonight's meeting was a motion that has been filed concerning Andover Street, some mitigation ideas for traffic, safety, and so forth, complete streets design. And with that, I will now pass it off to our traffic engineer, Ms. Altman.
Good evening. I just wanted to take a second to kind of backtrack to where this all began. A few years ago, before I was here, the council gave the transportation division, some capital money to do something with Andover Street, basically. So that money had been sitting for a while. I took it as an opportunity to have a comprehensive look at the Andover Street rather than try and do some, patchwork, which had maybe not long-term effects. So we retained Stantec, and they have put together a long-term concept design, also a short-term implementation should we want to move forward with that in between now and the long-term implementation. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin from Stantec, and she's going to walk you through kind of how we got here. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to the subcommittee for having me. My name is Erin Cameron, and I'm a transportation planner and the lead planner for the Andover Street conceptual design project that was undertaken by the Stantec Urban Mobility Group. I have a 20 to 30 minute presentation for you all today, but do please stop me if you have any questions of anything that I discuss. On the screen here is the agenda for what I will go over, including the scope of the project, some existing conditions information that was informed the process. We also did an engagement strategy early in the summer and the spring that I will recap before detailing the cross sections and long-term and short-term designs that we came up with. I'm also joined on Zoom by my colleague, Michael Clark, who is unable to join us in person today. So the Andover Street process that we were looking at looked at the stretch of Andover Street in the Belvedere neighborhood from Park Road in the west and extending to the Tewksbury line on the east. And we went out there early in the spring and realized that this is a road that has a lot of complications, but it also has a lot of opportunity. As you can see on the screen here, Andover Street is used by people to walk through their neighborhood, to ride the bus into Lowell. It also is the entrance to the 2 schools, the Riley and the Sullivan School, and is frequented by buses. when you get closer to the Tewksbury line, there have already been improvements to sidewalk and pedestrian spaces, and this can be enhanced. A complete streets process looks at making sure a roadway is safe and welcoming for all users rather than just drivers. So the approach that we took was to not just look at it at Andover Street as a means to move vehicles through Lowell, but to really consider what the residents needed, what the students at these schools needed, and how we can get more folks to use Andover Street in a variety of ways. This is right in line with the City of Lowell's policies that were defined in the Go Lowell Multimodal Complete Streets Plan. As you can see here, the current mode choice of many folks in Lowell is to drive their vehicles, but there is an interest in using transit on the bus and to use bicycles more. I'm going to highlight the bicycles just for this process, as there's a 28% interest in using bicyclists, but you only have 9%. So how can we use this process to bridge that gap and invite bicyclists to use Andover Street? The Multimodal Complete Streets Plan did identify Andover Street as an area that needs particular attention. So from Nesmith Street to Clark, it was considered a high-need corridor that needed to look at from a safety perspective and a complete streets approach. It was also identified as a route for a bus pilot program between Nesmith and Wentworth, and then from Wentworth to River, it was identified as a pedestrian priority zone. So we considered all of this in our design, making sure that our design was friendly to buses, but also pedestrians, as that was identified in the plan. When the process began, we knew that we needed to collect some data, so we went out and we collected traffic counts and realized that there are about 20,000 vehicles moving on Andover Street daily. So that's about 10,000 in either direction, spanning the course of the entire day. We also collected speed data, and what you can see here is that along the corridor, you do have folks traveling at a consistent speed between 35 and 40 miles per hour. Now, that is in line with the posted speed limit that Lowell has established for Andover Street, but it's a problem now that we're talking about this street as a neighborhood and a front door to schools. When a vehicle hits a pedestrian at 20 miles per hour, the pedestrian is much more likely to survive that incident. When a car is driving 40 miles per hour, as they are on Andover Street, there's a 77% likelihood that that incident will result in a fatality. What I'm showing here is just that folks are traveling at that speeds, and we want to make sure that the design that we create will not just allow Lowell to post the speed limit at a lower speed, but also that cars will not want to travel over it. There's a way that we can design the road so that cars will drive slower and in a safer manner. To start, we can look at the width of the road. So today, Andover Street is fairly wide. You have two travel lanes that are 12 feet and one 10-foot left turn lane that allows vehicles to go in either direction. The problem with this is that 12 feet lanes are typical for a highway. So what you're seeing on this slide is Andover Street and their cross-section on the top, but then on the bottom, I'm showing the I-90 interchange in Alston, so it's a highway, but we have 12-foot lanes here. Andover Street doesn't need 12-foot lanes. It needs something closer to 11 or 10-foot lanes to encourage folks to drive slower. We also know that the pedestrian infrastructure along Andover Street is something that needs some improvements. You're doing some good things here. You can see I'm highlighting where we have tactile warning strips. This allows somebody who's walking to feel that there is a change and that they are entering a street. It allows someone who has visibility concerns or maybe pushing a stroller to realize I'm entering a curb cut. That works when there are curb cuts, but across Andover Street, we really are lacking those pedestrian infrastructure elements. We also looked at crosswalks. So what you see here is the 3 crosswalks on the Andover Street corridor, which are at the intersection at Nesmith, Douglas Road, where there's a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, and then one that's near Holbrook Avenue. It's painted, but you can't really see it when you're driving down the road, and then you do have one past the town line. When you have a stretch that's almost a mile, under Massachusetts law, a pedestrian is legally allowed to cross the street at anywhere along this corridor as it's more than 300 feet between the crosswalks. If pedestrians are legally allowed to cross the street, we want to make sure that they are safe in doing so. So our design is going to recommend that crosswalks are placed more frequently, somewhere closer to 200 to 500 feet along the corridor so that you're never traveling out of your way to cross the street in a safe manner. We also realized that the bus stops along Andover Street seem to be placed haphazardly across the corridor. They are as close as 0.1 miles in some areas, and this does not allow the bus to gain any momentum as it's traveling down the roadway, and folks can't predict where the bus stop is. Instead, we're going to use national guidance of having bus stops be about a quarter mile or so apart, and so we're able to have fewer bus stops, but at more regular intervals along Andover Street. So that's some of the existing conditions data. That's what the data has told us needs to happen. But as I said, we did speak to the public. We had an in-person meeting with the Belvedere neighborhood at their neighborhood association meeting, and we also did a virtual process where folks were able to tell us what they cared about and discuss project goals. So what is depicted on the screen are some of the concerns that we heard through that process. We heard a lot that folks are driving too fast. We heard a lot that the road is noisy and that there aren't enough sidewalks. We also heard that it's important to turn left at some of these streets as it's the way that people can get to their neighborhood. So we included all of this into our thinking as we came up with the design. Now that we understood what was wrong with Andover Street, we were able to think more, what would you like to see? As I talked about, Andover Street is quite wide, and we have the opportunity to add additional elements that will encourage a complete street. Folks were interested in bicycle facilities such as a multi-use path or in protected bicycle lanes. We also talked about adding crossing islands and wider planted boulevards to encourage the trees that are out there today to continue to thrive, and add crosswalks so that we can get closer to that standard of 200 to 500 feet. Through this process, we asked the residents and the users of Andover Street what they wanted to see in the process, what goals were important to them. And we heard things as we need to improve local access to downtown. We need to reduce cut through on the side streets. People are avoiding Andover Street today and driving through the neighborhood because it's so difficult to turn left and access the road. So through these conversations, we determined that the goals for Andover Street would be to prioritize walkability, increase connectivity, preserve character, and accommodate multimodality. And you will see all of these included in the designs that I will share shortly. One of the big concerns with Andover Street is that it is currently a concrete roadway. So it's more difficult to make some of the adjustments that we could typically do with an asphalt roadway. And folks did request us looking into if we removed it entirely. This is not ideal. If we were to remove the concrete on Andover Street, it would result in lane closures. We'd have severe traffic implications. The residents would experience noise, vibration, and the city itself would have high disposal costs. And so our design is going to suggest ways that we can design Andover Street and keep the concrete through engineering means as opposed to removal altogether. So, as I alluded to earlier, Andover Street today has wide travel lanes and narrow sidewalks on either side. It also has large trees that we want to preserve. So, here's Andover Street today. We took this picture from the middle of the roadway, and it was very useful because it allows us to see how Andover Street can change. We talked about how we wanted to add additional crosswalks. We want to consolidate the bus stops, and then we also want to add left turn pockets rather than the left turn lane in key areas. So we worked with the city and we talked with the community earlier in the summer to identify where those turn pockets need to be to ensure that folks are able to get to their houses and around the neighborhood. I'm now going to talk about the 2 long-term design recommendations. So this process was charged with looking at what Andover Street could be in 10, 15 years. And so we came up with 2 options that will ensure that folks are still able to travel along the corridor, but also provide an amenity for cyclists and pedestrians. So the first one is a multi-use path where we're narrowing the roadway by adding space to the southern curb and adding in a multi-use path. And the second is when we narrow the roadway from both sides and add a cycle track in either direction. This is just a plan view of what that multi-use path can look like. You'll see that we're adding in bump outs to ensure that cars are able to slow down as they're approaching intersections. And we do have this nice facility on the southern side of the curb for people to walk and ride their bikes and for kids to play. One other element of this design was to where we have a left turn lane on the opposite side of the intersection, we're adding in a crossing island as a countermeasure so that folks who are crossing the street will have a place to stop and continue if needed. And then just as I showed before, we had what Andover Street looks like today. This is what it could look like with the multi-use path. The second option was if we narrowed the roadway from both sides of the street and we looked at adding cycle tracks. So this would be a bicycle facility on both directions, but raised up to sidewalk level. Most of the other elements of this are very similar to what you just saw with the multi-use path, but we do have bus stops and advanced yield markings indicated in both plans as well. And this is what Andover Street could look like with cycle tracks. These are 2 long-term concepts of what Andover Street could be, but aware that this will take a long time and there's interest in changing Andover Street in the shorter term, we also looked at what we could do with paint as soon as in the next few years to ensure that Andover Street can evolve into this long-term concept. So what we're suggesting here is the same cycle track plan that you saw just a few slides ago, but as opposed to doing this with curb work, we're able to do it with paint by adding in the bicycle facilities and moving the center line of the road. Here's a quick rendering of what that might look like. The one thing that we do want to consider when we are looking at a on-street painted option is how we can keep those bicyclists safe, how we can ensure that this is a snow-proof design, as we want to make sure that this is something that could last until the long-term plan could work and folks aren't just driving around the cars who are traveling in this lane because they can today. So there are a few options that are out there, including adding in barrels or what we call armadillos, which are small barriers that will go on the ground. We can also add plantings for the summer months. One thing that we talked about with the engineering team is that bollards and flex posts are not preferred. You may have seen them in downtown Boston. They won't give the same character that the neighbors are looking for, and it'll be a lot of flex posts down the entire corridor. But these other options are definitely approaches that could be used. The last part of our scope was to look at how this could be implemented. So we took a look at all of the funding opportunities that are available to Lowell and how this may be applicable. There's a separate memorandum that we can share with the committee that talks about the opportunities and how Lowell can go about approaching these applications. But we want to make sure that the designs that we created are implementable and could get on the tip as soon as in the next couple of years. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Liz. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
So I think this is where we are. We have two concepts presented and potential short-term implementation. I personally don't think I would recommend installing the short-term unless we were committed to the long-term. So this is something that we will present also. I'm attending Belvedere neighborhood, I guess it's a couple weeks, just to make sure I hear all their comments. They've received this. So from here, we need to find a way forward. If this is something that we are getting a lot of positive feedback for, that the community and the council feels like this is a worthwhile investment in the future of Andover Street, we would, if we want to get on the TIP program, the city would have to provide funding for design, which we haven't really done an estimate on that, how much something like this would cost. The benefit to maintaining the concrete is a much reduced cost than removing all the concrete and putting down a new asphalt road. So there's a way to construct this by kind of breaking up the concrete and leaving it in place as a drainage feature, or a drainage subbase. So that's kind of, at this point, I'd wanted to present this to you, show that we have two really good alternatives here that are actually feasible, that they could be done. But we would need to have a commitment, I think, from the city and from the council and from engineering, and we have run this by engineering. They were on board the whole process, so they're aware, and we've incorporated their comments. So that's kind of where we are. I wanted to present this to you, to give you this information, and then we can take this and we would have to move forward in design if that was something that we decided that we wanted to commit to. So that's my pitch.
Awesome, great. Thank you. Also joined by our Assistant City Manager and DPD Director, Giovanni Baez-Rose. Looks great to me, but as you know, I recently found out last week, my opinion doesn't really mean much with Belvedere issues. So I think I'll pass it off to Councilor Mercier for her opinion and Councilor Noon to see what they think about it. And with that, Councilor Mercier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that they done away with the thought of having bollards all over the place. I didn't like that approach. The one that I'm looking at now is very nice. I know that people thought that there'd be a meridian strip whereby there'd be trees and flowers and this and that, but I think that that would be kind of a little bit too much because of the fact you have to maintain it even more, and trees grow, and would it prohibit the view for turning onto certain streets? But that looks pretty good. I'm glad we're addressing, this is an entrance into the city. Is this a city road or a state road?
This is our road.
Our road, okay, so that clears that. But I think it looks very nice. You're including everybody, bicyclists, walkers. I know there's a lot of sidewalk areas along Andover Street that need to be repaired. I just reported one some time ago. It was in the homeowner that lived there never complained to me. I just happened to see it, and I said, holy Moses, and it was fixed, so that's a good thing. So, and I didn't make a motion either. That's a good thing too. But anyway, I'm happy, and I'm glad that you took time to address it. I'm very, very grateful. I know I speak for many when I say the neighborhood is grateful as well. I'll be curious to go to that neighborhood meeting to see what people there have to say about it, because I always like to hear comments from more people that are affected by it. I am too. That is my neighborhood. I'm on Burnham Road, so I do see it, and I know that they took away the cement and they put the hot top. I don't mind as long as it's smooth, and it's really nice, and I'm very, very happy. Thank you so much. We went through a lot with barrels and detours and curb and cuts and this, but it's worth it. It's worth it, and I'm very grateful. So thank you for all the hard work that you do. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that I know narrowing a road is scary to, and some level in people's brain that, they're going to take out the left turn lane. It's going to be hard to turn. This will be so much easier to turn from the side streets because you won't have to be looking for people in that center turn lane doing all kinds of crazy things. It will slow traffic down. It will we're not taking away any capacity of the road. It's just slowing people down to a neighborhood street that is an entrance into Lowell. Yeah. And this would enable us to keep those beautiful trees and actually maybe even save some of them.
Right, right. Very good. Thank you so much.
Councilor Noon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Aaron, for the presentation on the conceptual of the Andover Street. I was at the neighborhood meeting that you both were there back in spring, right, of 2023. A lot of those you list, Aaron, of the concern of the residents were all placed in this report. I think it's worthwhile looking into it as a city. Since it is city street, people talk about, even with the former city councilors, Dave Conway, who happened to live right there, say people sped through that, and you mark it 35 and they go 50, and Chairman Rook said probably even faster than that, Bess. Yeah, it could be faster than that. It's very dangerous, and you don't have crosswalk, only those three that you're talking about. So I think I would be happy to, you mentioned this, that you're going back to the neighborhood and to present this to them and see what their thought is. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you also indicated as well that to get on the TIP program, what do we need to do as a council?
We would need to fund the design. So what the initial funding would be to retain a designer to get to 25% plans, put that in front of the project review committee to get on the TIP. I think a project like this, the state is doing them in a lot of locations, just this type of thing. Raise two-way bicycle tracks or shared use path up at sidewalk level. They're doing it in a lot of places to kind of narrow roads. So I think this has a good chance of scoring highly in the project review committee. Then once it's approved and it's put on the TIP, then the city would fund the rest of the design. Okay. So it can be done in two phases.
Liz, when you talk about fund the design, is there money out there that you would apply to get the design fund?
It's possible. There are a couple of things that Aaron indicated. We could try for MassWorks. We could try for a couple different programs that MassDOT and USDOT are putting out there for design and of these type of projects. So it's a potential for design funding from an outside source, but we'd have to see.
Yeah. I certainly would encourage the reaching out and getting outside sources to fund the design because I'm not sure if we as a city do have that. What amount you're talking about for the design costs?
Probably for initial design, to get to that 25%. I mean, this is a long road. We're probably looking at $250,000 just for 25% design, and then probably another 600 to 800 to get to full construction drawings.
I see.
So it's it's not a small commitment of funding for even the design portion.
Right, right.
So, but that's my ballpark, that's, kind of on the higher end, I would think.
I could envision between the design and the construction, the cost is right in between the $8 and $10 million at least for this project.
Probably, and that is why the TIP is probably one of our best options
Okay.
for design or for construction funding.
Okay. Well, thank you, Liz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Noon. Just real quick before I go to Councilor Janess, I know that our DPD director, Ms. Baez-Rose, has been around for a little while. We have filed multiple motions on this before. I know Councilor Mercia has been at the head of this for a long time. Speed and safety. So I just wanted to get a quick word from our Assistant City Manager, please.
Thank you, Counselor. I want to thank Liz and the team at Stantec for their work on this. The work that they've done is creating a path forward for a problem that we've been long discussing, that the planning department has been asked many times to look at ways to address the speeding issues, the pedestrian sort of amenities that exist along Andover Street. And we have for a long time continued to do some patching, some Band-Aid work, but I think we've kind of gotten to the place where, although it may be a pretty significant change and cost, not a small amount of money, it's hard for DPD to continue to recommend patches to fix a problem that is structural to the street. And so, we're hopeful that the community will be supportive of one of these options and that we can think on a larger scale about ways that we can make the improvements that we know need to happen. It's slowing speeds on Andover Street is never going to be solved by just plopping down one or two painted crosswalks and these types of things. So I'm really thankful that we've had the funds to be able to do this kind of concept thinking, and look forward to hearing comments from the community, because I think that from a planning perspective, we know that the change is going to need to be dramatic and systemic to really address the issues that we've been asked to deal with on Andover Street.
Great, thank you. I mean, it really is an extensive, detailed report that offers a lot of different options, I think, for the better. I'm also joined by Councilor Gitche as well. And with that, I'll pass it off to Councilor Janess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this presentation, and overall, I really like the look of this, and I feel like this is the kind of approach that we should be taking on many roads around the city. One concern I have would just be the fact that these cycle tracks or multi-use path, however we set it up, would basically dead end at that intersection of Nesmith and Andover, and leaving people in a very, very dangerous place to then be on a bike to continue downtown or wherever they're going from there. And so I wonder if it makes more sense to think about that before we really spend all this effort to get this implemented. I would just hate to see us spend a ton of money and then say, well, nobody's still using the bike lanes. And the reason is, once you get to Nesmith Street, it's a challenge, to put it mildly. And the other thing I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation is that there are many places in the city that would benefit from looking at this kind of thing and trying to do it again. Would it make sense as a city to try and bring some of this design work in-house, potentially creating positions, hiring people that can do this kind of work across the city? Because clearly we have plenty of work if we were to employ someone to do that. I don't know what kind of commitment that would take from the city, but if we're going to be doing too many of these, it may be a more cost-effective way to go. And I think that's just something that we should consider come budget time.
Thank you. Anything else? So, perfect world, Liz, you go to another couple of neighborhood meetings, represent it to the council 6 to 8 months down the line, and ask for a decision based upon what you're hearing, both in the short and long term?
Correct. I think we do put it out there to the neighborhood. We put it out there on the website, and take it to wherever we need to take it, kind of build a consensus on whether people are in favor of this type of reconstruction, and then we can talk about it in either whether any grants have been, available, or whether we need to ask for capital funds for partial.
Yeah, I know NEMCOG does a lot with the tips too, right?
I'm sorry?
NEMCOG does a lot with tips and getting them on a list.
Correct. And
Yeah.
to be honest, the city has not advanced their own project in the tip for
I know,
a while.
right, yeah.
UMass Lowell has one that's kind of pushed out now. The state has a couple on there, but the city itself hasn't advanced.
I think the only one was the Rock Bridge, but that's not really a Lowell project, right?
Correct,
It's-
that's
yeah.
the state.
But as far as within the city, being there for the past 4 years, hardly any at all, or other neighboring cities and towns are always pushing them forward, right? So, just out of curiosity, the time and effort and the cost that went into this report, did you have that ballpark figure?
On how much we retain Stantec for?
Yeah, and then just the time of, how much hours, I guess, we put into it.
The contract was for $65,000.
Okay. Just curious question, that's all, so.
But I think this gives us a really good starting
Yeah.
place for design. And when we retain a designer, however that gets funded, they have a place to start. They don't have to go through this process.
Okay, and this is already posted on the website?
I did not post this yet until we had this meeting. I will post it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay with my colleagues, I'd say to post it right away, get the word out. I'm sure you'll have multiple meetings on it with the neighborhood to see what it's very extensive and really well done. I thank you, for your time and coming forward to present it. And if we can just do that, and then we can start the public discussion and get the ball rolling.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you scheduling this meeting to hear this outside of council.
All good.
So, thank you very much.
No problem. Council, get you anything? Okay, awesome. Mate. Anybody else before we adjourn? All right. So we'll do a report of progress, pass it along to the council tonight, and I look forward to the future. All right. Thank you very much for your time. Awesome.
Appreciate
Great.
it. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Awesome. Thank you very much.